It is an age-old question. Who is the deadliest warrior? Chances are at some point in your life you've been chilling with your boys, maybe ingesting some suds, getting a little bit buzzed, and you thought, hey, who's the deadliest warrior? Who would win in a fight? Your dad or my dad? My dad's dead, so he would... Who would win? An Apache or a gladiator? The Army Rangers or the North Korean Special Operators? Who truly is the deadliest warrior? Well, you're in luck, buckaroo, because Spike TV,
stuff men like. Yeah, that stuff.
had the answer for you back in 2009 to 2011. They had the show Deadliest Warrior. And my God, was it one of the best shows we ever got on TV. It was truly a gift from God. Manna from heaven. Now, this kind of goes along with the theme, and I touched on slightly that we're going to make a Deadliest Warrior episode in the last video of this style, and I wanted to kind of talk about Deadliest Warrior more because there's a lot to talk about. I got to give him props. Like the premise, the idea, everything about it, I am all in, baby. I love everything about it. I think it's really fun. The execution, on the other hand, is not the best. It's definitely, there's some things in the show when I watch it now, especially as a grown-ass man, where I'm like, there's so many like things where you're like, this doesn't add up. With that being said, Deadliest Warrior had 3 seasons, typically I believe with 10 episodes apiece, and it had an average viewer base, I want to say around 1.5 million viewers. Now, for YouTube, that'd be pretty good, but we're dealing with network television, and with network TV, there are a lot of hands in the cookie jar. So whatever monetary gain would be had with a regular audience base of 1.5 million viewers would have to be divvied up amongst a massive cast of people, producers, writers, all these different things. If you look at the end credits of Deadliest Warrior, there's a lot of people that you have to pay at the end of the day. That would cut up your profits a lot, and you're still trying to run a TV show that has some expenses. I mean, they were using ballistic dummies, they had to procure firearms and explosives for the show, they had to have the warehouse space, and then all the back-end logistics of all the editing and all the composing that goes into it, right? So I would guess the show maybe got too much of the juice wasn't worth the squeeze for them, so they decided to pull the rug on it. In Guntube, we have started to use a lot of ballistic dummies, and Deadliest Warrior did it first, man. I think we all watched Deadliest Warrior and we're like, that's a brilliant idea, we gotta bring that back. And it probably really helped out the ballistic dummy market because they must have been in a slump for years until the Guntubers brought them back. And those things aren't cheap, dude. They're pretty expensive. Like, it's not like you're gonna be out there buying a ballistic dummy for the funsies of it, especially when they all have like the organs and the blood vessels. Like, those things run a pretty penny. Now, with that being said, their 3-season run had some fun episodes. It didn't have all my favorite warriors throughout history. They didn't have any English longbowmen loosening the arrows at a potential. Who would the English longbowmen fight? Who do you think they would fight?
They'd probably put them against like some Native American warrior.
They probably would, yeah. They had a real thing where they were like, all right, who do we put these medieval Europeans against? All right, let's go make them go fight the Native Americans. There are a lot of shows to cover with Deadliest Warrior. We can't cover them all in this episode. And why, may you ask? Well, it would be like a 10-hour long episode. I want to split this up for a few reasons. YouTube money. Admin needs his sweet YouTube money, which is why we have to thank the perfect sponsor for this episode.
Americana Pipes and Apparel, fantastic zoomers, getting after the milsurp space and arena. They have all the things to drip you out when it comes to milsurp and or the proper accoutrement that goes with it. Anywhere from night vision knives, manuals, and a bunch of course really cool milsurp drip from obscure countries that you didn't even know exist probably. I appreciate them helping out the channel, and I encourage you guys to go check out Americana Pipe Dream Apparel.
Now, Deadliest Warrior, the rules of the show. I mean, typically they would take a warrior from some point of history and pitch him against another warrior. They started off with like ancient combat or combat without firearms. So they do like a 1v1. I think the first one was Apache versus Gladiator, and then they would do Spartan versus Ninja. Terrible matchup. That episode was actually full of animosity where dudes were like simping for either side and a lot of cringe. I love it. One of my favorite aspects about the show is the narrator.
The Spartan. The battlefield butcher from ancient Greece. A ninja, the legendary master of death from Japan. Who is deadliest?
The narrator being David Wenham, the dude that was in 300. And so there's like this perfect little zeitgeist of media going on, especially during like the Spartan episode, because you have a dude that was in the movie 300, and 300 was a pretty popular movie back in 2007. You know, it still has a grip on the social media zeitgeist of how people view ancient Sparta. A bunch of jack dudes in Speedos fighting Persians for Western civilization against the Persians. I love that dude's voice, and he does a great job. You know, he's in Lord of the Rings, man. Yeah, it's Faramir, dude. Eowyn was kind of a badass. I am no man.
Famous line.
What's this video about? So then they have three guys being the host of the show. I think they would have Jeff, the computer whiz, and then the Dr. Obvious. The doctor's one of my favorite characters because he just adds such obvious clues about medical stuff. He's like, oh yeah, so this entered his head and he would be dead. And that's like the thing. And then the computer nerd is just like there for like a fill-in. I think the computer whiz got switched out from another guy towards the latest season. It's like this program was developed by Slytherin Games, and it's like a simulation where you run the battle 1,000 times, and then who comes out on top? And he's just like the stereotypical like clack, 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 clack. And the program looks like the Matrix when they hit enter for the battle. It's like with all the numbers. And then they bring in experts. I say that loosely, experts. I have suspicions a lot of those guys were like actors, and they're just like, all right, just play the part. We'll tell you what to do. And if anything, I wish they had more pageantry for the experts. Like I wish they were even more hostile to each other. If I was on the show, I'd be really nice to the other team. Like I'd be like really encouraging, like, hey, you guys got this. Yeah, you're the deadliest warrior. We believe in you. And throw them off. It's called Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Do not do what they expect. It's kind of the rules of the show. But I thought the production value was fun. I thought it was a good time for the era. Don't be so mean to it. They were working with what they knew and what was cool. And pop culture is built upon itself. And they would use a lot of ballistic dummies. And I love that because now, another matchup that I thought was rather interesting was SWAT versus GSG-9. What is GSG-9, you may ask, if you're not familiar? GSG-9 is a branch of the German federal police that are high-speed operators. Now, you also have guys that are part of the German state police, which is like SEK. Now, GSG-9, being the federal guys, may be considered more high-speed than SEK. Maybe they butt heads a lot. Maybe they compete. I don't know the German police culture. What I know a lot better is American police culture. And let me tell you, I don't recall in the episode, and I'm sure they did in the episode, but they just said SWAT, like American SWAT. There is no single SWAT agency that covers the entire country, right? A lot of SWAT departments are based off of your city. Even then, depending on the size and funding of your city, your SWAT team most likely will be part-time. Back at my agency I went to, the SWAT team was part-time, meaning you would do the tryout, and then you would go through the board, and then you go through the training if you get on, and then after SWAT school, you now be a part of the SWAT team, but you're the low man on the totem pole. So you essentially just do whatever your SWAT team tells you to do. You may be an experienced cop, but you're still a new guy in the SWAT team. So say with the part-time SWAT team, there's a situation where the SWAT team is needed. You would get the call, go back, grab all your SWAT gear, roll out with the SWAT team, and go address that issue. Now, there are departments that have full-time SWAT teams. The full-time SWAT teams are typically regarded to be a little bit of the higher caliber. It's typically rare, though, to have a full-time SWAT team unless you're a major metropolis of a city. Think like Phoenix, LA, Dallas, New York, really large cities. Now, they didn't really say like which department was going up against GSG-9. They just said SWAT, which I think is silly. And a lot of the gear and stuff they were using, I mean, at this point in time is kind of dated compared to what you would have seen up to current standards. I don't know if they're trying to do like a freeze frame in time for these SWAT operators. That's one thing about Deadliest Warriors, like the guns they pick. Of course, it's interesting. Like I get it. Like they have to pick cool guns, but at the same time, it's like they always pick such kind of weird guns that would have been like, we wouldn't have been using that, or everyone would have had like a uniformed like SBR and then maybe less lethal guys and stuff like that. I know I'm nitpicking. All of that to say, one of my favorite things about the episode was that they had like a crowd control style taser that's like a claymore, and when they're doing like their lethal gun battle death match, one of the guys sets it up and lays an ambush with the claymore for the taser, and then sets it off and then tases the guy, and the guy goes down and he gets back up because it's only a taser. I hate this so much. I need you to feel my frustration about why I hate that so much. It's the most ridiculous thing.
Disappointed!
I kind of like it because it's like the SWAT team pulls up, GSG-9's there. One guy's a marksman on each team. One guy, they have assault rifles and shotguns. I think it's fun. I like that. I hate that they would employ as a booby trap a taser claymore. I hate everything about that. It makes me really, really mad. The show would kind of have a trend of really screwing the pooch when it came to getting things right with accuracy here and there. Also keeping in touch with a realistic baseline of reality, like employing a taser claymore against against people that have body armor and assault rifles. I'm still pretty salty about this. One that I really watched a lot because I was kind of fascinated by it was the Waffen SS versus the Vietcong. I might have to save that one for last. So let's go in with the Rangers versus North Koreans first. I don't know, in their infinite wisdom, if it was a good idea. It would be like saying, who is the deadliest warrior? Your local JV football team or the Kansas City Chiefs? That's the matchup that they're giving with that. The North Koreans are all gonna be like 5'6" if like they're special operator forces versus a bunch of 6'1" meat studs that are the most violent people you would ever meet. Literally groomed in the Ranger Battalion to become Uruk-hai killers. Do you know who they send in when they want to seize an airfield? The Army Rangers. You know who they send in for rescue when the Green Berets get in trouble? They send Army Rangers.
Who you gonna call?
The Army Rangers. Fujin operator, you know him. He's one of my favorite guys. He's an Army Ranger, and that dude's a psychopath in the best way possible. Now imagine pitching those guys up against a bunch of North Koreans that can't even feed themselves. To be fair, they have a great carbon footprint in North Korea. They have like no lights on when the sun goes down on the map. When I watched the matchup, like their final firefight, I remember thinking, yeah, this is ridiculous. They first kick off, they do like a 5-on-5, and the Army Rangers deploy into the battlefield, and the North Koreans kind of already have a defensive posture. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna stop you right there, Chief. Pause, and I'm looking at the North Koreans. They have like some old Chi-Com Eastern Bloc style helmets that are steel. No possible mount for night vision. Their gear is just like very antiquated and outdated. They're running their guns with iron sights going against these Army Rangers, which, to be fair, at this point in time, their kit for the show looks horrendous. They look like the airsofters you would find at your local airsoft field that just got into airsoft. Like, they don't look like the proper kit they would have at this point in the global war on terror, and I get it. Right, I get the show has limitations. They're like, hey, come on. They probably have a bunch of different producers for each episode to get the season out in time, and they're working with prop houses. The show came out in 2009 to 2011, and so this is going on in the global war on terror, and things have gotten pretty advanced to this point. The Ranger kit that you would have seen going into this point in time during the global war on terror is going to look pretty advanced. People kind of forget that. You're talking about guys running dual tubes. They got plate carriers. They're going to be running a lot of night ops. So they're going to be using night vision very heavily. For this situation, it should have started off at night with the Rangers with their night vision going in and just murdering all the North Koreans. Like, there wouldn't have been a fair gunfight whatsoever. Like, I get they gotta like pitch it to where it's like a semi-fair fight, but it's just not it's not how that happens. Like, that's not how this works with the Army Rangers. Like, they're gonna come in when it's dark and they're gonna murder all of you. When you're a young admin, when you're like 13, 14, when this show came out, because this was a great time to be alive for me. 2009 was the year Modern Warfare 2 came out, and I can't tell you how many hours teenage me spent playing that game, grinding to unlock the dragon skin camo for my guns. I think in Modern Warfare 2, my favorite gun was actually the War 21, and I'd run it with FMJ. And then you could also get noob tubed into oblivion by guys running one-man army. Man, those lobbies turned me into a young man. Kids these days have no idea. I hear kids talk trash in video game lobbies today. It sounds like a PC South Park episode where they're like being super mean. Like, hey, you stinky head, that's how you play Fortnite. The stuff I heard in Modern Warfare 2 sound like a KKK rally, dude. That episode was pretty ridiculous. It's a hard thing to imagine that would be a fair fight. It's almost like an insult to the Ranger battalions. Like, they would be like compared to the North Korean special operators. That's where I'd take offense. And there was kind of like a trend going on with Deadliest Warrior where they would make sure the Americans won, and for good reason. We're number one, baby. We're the best it ever was. But I think they did the Green Berets versus the spetsnaz, and the spetsnaz won with the ballistic knife. And that one kind of made me salty. I think everyone got mad about that one. Like, why are you making the Russians beat the Green Berets? Like, hey, you know what country you're in making the show, right? Come on, dude. And I know looking back at the show and criticizing it, it's kind of like unfair compared to what we know today. But at the same time, I also do appreciate the show because I think I got a lot of people interested in history and the firearms aspects of things. You know, there's like a lot of things going on. We talked about in the last episode, watching History Channel, Discovery Channel, Military Channel, and then you're playing Call of Duties, and then you're watching like Deadliest Warrior, and then you start getting these inception ideas planted in your head that you're gonna go off and do some service to some capacity, right? Like, it planted a lot of the seeds. So I do appreciate that. It was kind of formative of the youth. That being said, there's still things we can criticize about the show. One of my least favorite parts about the show is actually the camera work. I watched the entire episode of the SS versus the Vietcong. I know we're gonna cover it at the end, but I remember watching the episode and I was like, I feel so so tired. Like just how they edit and then like the repetitiveness of it, and the camera, like they feel like it filmed like a Jason Bourne movie, but like for all of the shots.
And the Vietcong. Our experts have finished their exhaustive testing.
Now, one of the bravest matchups they did was probably Joan of Arc versus William the Conqueror. Now, I'm gonna blow past this one real quick because it makes me kind of mad. Joan of Arc wasn't even known as being like a renowned warrior. She was kind of like a hype beast back in the day for the French. Like the French just kept getting mobbed on by the English, and if Joan of Arc came around, she's like, I have visions from God. This is what we must do. And they started winning, and she became like a hero. It's cool. It's a good story. But she wasn't renowned for her like her female warrior prowess. I think she was like a teenager at the time too. So it's even more impressive that like in medieval Europe, these French nobles were like, oh, what does teenage girl say we should do? Oh, this is how we should fight the British? Yeah, let's take her advice. She's clearly getting a message from God. I think they would even kill her at the end, right? Yeah, they burned Joan of Arc at the stake. Like she had a good run, and then they're like, oh, I gotta kill this girl. And the French do the French thing. Versus William the Conqueror, who actually was also technically a Frenchman. He was a Norman, and then he invaded the English, I believe, at the Battle of Hastings of 1066. That one kind of is offensive in some regards to history because it's like you're taking this symbol that is a teenage French girl versus a Norman that is William the Conqueror. Totally different worlds, especially in the world of hand-to-hand combat. Right now, Joan of Arc was around, I think, in the 1400s. William the Conqueror would have been in the 1000s. So it's a gap of 400 years. So armor advancements, some weapon advancements would have been had in the favor of Joan of Arc. And I think for that match, they even did like a 5-on-5. And I think Joan of Arc won. But even still, if you took them and you did a 1v1, William the Conqueror versus Joan of Arc, a grown man raised in medieval times with the brutality that he would have known versus a teenage girl, also in the same era, like in the same little ballpark era, separated by 400 years, but still a very brutal time to be alive, considering she would end up getting burned at the stake. Like, that's a hard way. That's a rough way to go, dude.
That's rough, buddy.
In a hand-to-hand combat, a grown man like that grew up fighting with hand-to-hand weapons is going to just absolutely mop the floor with competition. That is Joan of Arc. It's kind of insulting. They made her win. Like in the simulation, Joan won this many times versus William the Conqueror. It's like, all right. Like at that point, it gets kind of offensive.
Disappointed!
Now, the last episode that I want to cover is the Waffen SS versus the Vietcong. For whatever reason, this one got my goat, and I find it really interesting. There is a lot of boomerisms around like German military stuff from World War II, a lot of preconceived notions, and especially with the Viet Cong. You gotta think that's like their prime demographic of like who to dislike would be the Viet Man based off the Vietnam War not too long ago. The Waffen SS versus the Viet Cong is gonna be another one of my least favorite examples of a matchup because it had potential to be really cool. Like I like the idea. It's like I don't mind the matchups as much. What I don't like is the lack of attention to detail. In some cases, I get what they were doing, but in other cases, they could have done it cooler. Technically, they were right. But at the same time, I was mad. Mainly at the weapon choices. So with the Waffen SS, they were using like MP28s, bouncing Betty mines, broom handle Mausers, flamethrower. That's like the three weapons they showed off. And they would go head to head with like the Viet Cong booby traps, which is just punji sticks with human feces on it. And then like the MAP 49 and their version of a booby trapped grenade. Like, those are the three comparisons. One of my favorite things about like the show too is like in their fight club, in their warehouse, they call it the fight club, I believe. In the fight club, they would have these guys kind of like, you would see the B-roll, and they're just doing a lot of like random nonsense that makes no sense. I'll demonstrate. In the fight club, they'd be doing a lot of this for the camera. So the Waffen SS prop guns, they had a PPSH 41. They had no real German military arms for them to demo. And the Viet Cong would also have AKs there, but they never used AKs in the final battle. So it's just like a total like tease of what could have been. And it really bummed me out because there's a lot of potential there, right? I know the Germans don't have the best street. But one thing they did really good was creating really cool firearms and technology. They had the STG-44, the Gewehr 43, the MG-42, MP-40, Kar 98. I would assume they both went with like early war variants of the Waffen SS and the Viet Cong, which really bums me out. It would have made it way more interesting if a little bit more late war style. Like if the Viet Cong had their AKMs, SKSs, RPDs, other American captured arms, maybe like even the M16, I think that would have been way more interesting. That'd been way more fun. Like, and even in the B-roll battles they show of like the Viet Cong fighting the Americans, there's like one guy who like sprays his MAP 49 in the sky, and then a Huey like crashes. So it was like a 9mm just took down a Huey is what they're implying. It hurts, man. It hurts. It hurts deep because it's kind of like a dang, dude, there was so much potential there. And there's a lot of good history to dive into. And I really wish they would have kind of like redone the show to be a little bit more on the historical side of things, because they kind of do like a streamline, like the Waffen SS, Hitler's bad guys.
The fanatical shock troops who led Adolf Hitler's evil charge for world domination.
It's like, yeah, okay. All right, you got to kind of explain a little bit more of the SS, maybe some of the divisions, maybe the Vietcong too. It'd be fun to explain maybe some of the leadership and internal factions, maybe the bashing of heads with maybe the NVA if there was any of that. Because with the Waffen SS, them in their group and their leadership would bash heads with the Wehrmacht, the regular German army. And there was a certain kind of animosity that they had, and a lot of the German leadership didn't like the Waffen SS, and then the Waffen SS would end up getting a lot of preferential treatment later on in the war, you know, with Heinrich Himmler being one of the very powerful guys that's over the SS, being like Hitler's number 2, right? So there's a lot of that could have been explained, and it could have been really fun to see that showdown. It would have been a pretty close battle if they do it like their typical deathmatch style, if they would have used, you know, more SCG-44s, and it would have been a little bit more interesting, because even in the B-roll for the Nazi stuff, they would have Germans at the Battle of the Bulge with SCG-44s, showing that off for their film and media. It kind of bums me out that they didn't have that. It kind of makes me sad. One of my favorite things about the show is that I believe Jeff would often say the word clip in reference to a magazine. Even in this episode, he said it like twice. He's like, how much does it hold in the clip?
3 clips, 30 seconds. 3 clips? How many rounds in the clip are we talking?
And then later he would say magazine, so I'm sure they're like, Jeff, we've talked about this. You better say magazine. I do love at the final battle when the SS go up against the Vietcong. It's like they have all these guns that they never talked about in the Fight Club, which maybe there were just logistical issues. Yet again, I don't know the back end, right? I don't know like the prop houses or the firearms that they had to procure. It was even impressive that they got explosives. I'll give them that. I find that impressive. But like the lack of the integral firearms, like the Kar 98, just not being talked about whatsoever. You know, they didn't cover the SKS or the AK or do any sort of competition with that. And then like how the firefight plays out, it's like only the guns they demoed gets the kills. The SS rolls up to their little village where they captured, the Vietcong captured an SS guy, and they're about to execute the SS guy. And then the SS dudes all essentially have the drop on these Vietcong, but then the rolling gunfight ensues after they don't kill enough of them. It's pretty good. Like, I love that. That's the crazy thing about firearms, is that whoever typically sees who first usually wins. And it's kind of really hard to replicate that, I guess, for a show. It's not as interesting, right? It's like if the SS guys laid a L-shaped, or probably more likely, the Vietcong guys laid an L-shaped ambush on the SS dudes, and then they win the gunfight just like that. I mean, with AKs and RPDs, it's like, yeah, you're gonna melt those guys. I mean, imagine being in an L shape with an RPDs going off. You're not gonna live. But that doesn't make for good TV, because then the 45 minutes you spent building up this battle is over in like 0.5 seconds. You gotta have your runtime in there. You gotta have the payoff for all the commercial breaks, because there's a lot of commercial breaks. You guys get mad about me about my ads, you forget cable TV. All right, you need to thank me for my service. Gentlemen, Deadliest Warrior was a staple in my youth, and I'm sure it was for you as well. I enjoyed the show thoroughly when I was younger, and now looking back at it, I think it's a little bit more cringe, but I still enjoy it. Like, I still think it's a good time. If you want us to break down a little bit more Deadliest Warrior episodes in the future, let me know in the comment section down below, and we can do that. As per usual, I have nothing else for you. I'll catch you on the flip. One of the Vietcong guys would also say bad boy.
And put this bad boy on.
Which resonates with my heart a lot, because I say bad boy all the time in my shooting videos, so...
what do they mean by bad boy?
You know, it's like, look at this bad boy.
I don't know what you mean.
It's like like a noun term? Is that the right terminology? Oh, look at that this bad boy can fit so many...
Okay, that makes sense. I picture it like, you bad boy.
What are you... It's kind of kinky, dude.
3 clips.